Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lalo.
And we've got a cool fantasy author guest who's done a lot of interesting things. She writes under N.M. Howell. We're going to call her Nico because she likes it. And she is a USA Today best-selling author, entrepreneur, and all-around nerd from the west coast of Canada. She has an architectural background and also worked as a cosplayer for a while and was editor-in-chief / creator of an international cosplay and geek culture magazine. And she's written about dragons and witches, but doesn't seem to take these things too seriously. Her books all look humorous. We'll ask her about it. But her latest series is Cats, Ghosts, and Avocado Toast. Hi, Nico. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you. You nailed that.
I can read it off Amazon, sometimes without too many.
Oh, come on. That doesn't always work. You have to admit it.
I know. If people put like words with syllables in their bio, I'm just forget it.
Simple word.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And for those who may not know, which is probably not that many people, what cosplaying is might be helpful.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm Nico. It sounds a lot better than NM, so we'll go with that. I'm a fantasy author, but I've sort of spread my my books across a number of genres. I started writing a few years ago. I have a background as a cosplayer, as Lindsay said, not too seriously, more of a hobby that accidentally turned into something a little bit more. My whole publishing journey started with the magazine, and then I moved to books when I realized that you can write a book on your own without a big fancy publisher, and I've been doing that ever since.
Okay, so I have to ask, for those who are wondering, cosplaying, dressing up as characters, is there more to it? How do you do this semi-pro?
Well, you know what? So the cosplay came after the magazine. I went to a convention in Vancouver quite a few years ago to practice my photography, and I had no idea what cosplay was at the time. I saw all these grown-ups dressing up in characters. It was Halloween on a month that it wasn't Halloween. And it was fascinating. The whole concept just completely blew my mind that people did this. When I started looking more into it, it's turned into more of an online blog, which then morphed into a magazine somehow. I started the project in my first year when I went back to do my master's, because what better than to start an extremely expensive and time-consuming project when you start a degree. And then I got into it from there. My interest in it was more in the sense of crafting and character creation. It's really uncomfortable wearing the costumes. Wasn't really my thing, but through the magazine I got discovered from a few different conventions and was asked to be a guest, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I haven't done it in a couple years. When I moved back to Vancouver, I sort of put that hobby aside, and I'm too busy writing books now, but I'm sort of coming out of cosplay retirement, I guess, for a big project down at BlizzCon next month, or in November. So that should be fun.
Are you dressing up as an orc? Cool.
No, not an orc. That would be awesome.
Come on, I gotta ask, what character were you?
What character was I?
Yeah.
I've done a lot of characters. My favorite, though, is just I've created my own. So I do sort of abstract fantasy characters of my own design. Which I think is one of the things that led me to writing, because I was just so fascinated with creating characters, not necessarily recreating something existing from a movie.
So do you have to make all your own costumes then? Because you wouldn't be able to just go pick up Darth Vader.
Well, you could pick up Darth Vader, I'm sure, if you had enough money. No, I made all my costumes. Yeah.
Okay, and how did the blog morph into starting a magazine? Because like you said, it sounds like something you maybe do for the love of it. Were you able to get to the point where you made money and that was how you paid the bills?
Yeah, the magazine did pretty well for quite a while. We were in bookstores and comic book shops all over Canada and the States, and I think a few stores internationally. So I did that for a couple years. Until I realized that, as a single business owner, doing everything myself, from putting it together to marketing to distribution. It was just way too much, so I scaled it back, and it's on, I don't want to say it's done now, but it's definitely on pause for a while.
It does seem like those kind of pictures from the conventions could lend themselves to really appealing magazines with all the photos of all the costumes and such. So now I'm
Yeah,
curious. I want to go see if I can find one of your out of print copies on eBay or something.
I'm sure you could. It's a Cause Culture magazine. I think
All
we're
right.
still on Facebook. I've shut down the website, but I'm sure you could. Oh, yeah,
Jeff is holding up his costume, or that's Jeff, right?
just looks just like him.
I found one of hers.
That's not
Oh,
me.
I see
Isn't
what
it?
you're showing up.
No. Well, yeah, I'll lie and say it is. That looks great.
All right, well, let's get into the fantasy novels, since probably more folks here are doing that kind of thing. It looks like you just published your first one a couple years ago. How did you jump in and get started? And you're selling pretty well, so that's good.
Um, Writing has always been something I've wanted to do, and never in 100 years did I think it was something that you could just do. Like, writing books for a living never really crossed my mind as a possibility. I was in between the second and third year, right before writing my thesis at university, and I had a 2-week break between my summer job and when the semester started. And obviously, as a student, had no money, nowhere to go, and I thought, okay, well, now is the perfect time to try and sit down and write the book that I've been wanting to write. And I did. And after following your guys' podcasts somewhat religiously for that entire summer, I put it online and people bought it. And it was shocking. So I wrote another one and people bought it. And I wrote another one and people kept buying it. So by the time my thesis was done, the books were doing so well that I could quit my job and do that full time.
Very cool. And what was your first one? Were these kind of witch cozies, I guess is the term?
The Brimstone Bay Mysteries. That was my very first series out. I had a lot to learn. Put them out with no editing, self-made covers. Learned a lot along the way. So I've revised them and since re-released them, but as I have with most of my earlier work.
Well, that's something people can do too, like especially if you're a student or you just don't have the money to go drop a bunch on covers to start out with.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
You know, it's harder if you don't have an amazing cover, but we've had a lot of people that have, I mean, I'm redoing my first covers, you know, hardly anybody gets it right out of the gates.
Well, exactly. And I'm having fun right now. I'm going back and relaunching most of my older series, and I don't know, covers is fun. Cozy Mysteries is pretty easy. Like paranormal cozies, the covers are all, I mean, they follow a lot of similar rules. You got the silhouette witch, and so it was easy enough to piece something together that fit. Wasn't spectacular, but it was genre appropriate, at least, I think, which is what helped it sell.
Right, and you've written in a couple different fantasy subgenres, and I think the avocado toast is a reverse harem. What is?
It's a bit of a shit mix of everything. I wrote that with my co-author, Elsie Hibbett. She does really amazing fantasy and paranormal novels. We just really sort of sat down and decided we wanted to have some fun. So that whole series is just a really lighthearted blend of all of our favorite genres. It's got cozy mystery, it's a light fantasy, it's got a reverse harem twist. It doesn't follow any of the rules that you're supposed to follow when writing in a specific genre. And we just had so much fun in it. It's got your sort of shifter, paranormal male shifter romance thing going on, but they're fluffy house cats, you know, not big strong lions. And yeah, it was a really, really nice break writing those from some of the more intense books through some of my pen names that I've been working on.
Oh, you've got pen names out there too. Are they secret, or do you want to share your experiences?
Some are secret. I write under Nicole Marie too, so that's more my adult-oriented name. I've got some paranormal, sort of dark reverse harem books through there. I recently pulled most of them. I'm doing a big relaunch in a couple weeks, and my Darkness Bites series, it's called. Yeah. And then the other pen names, maybe if I finish my glass of wine, maybe.
That's right. All right, guys, we'll booze her up and we'll see if she'll reveal all by the end of the hour.
Yeah. Tune in an hour.
Are they all under the fantasy umbrella?
Yeah, everything I do is paranormal, fantasy. I have a hard time sticking to reality.
Well, that's all right. Reality is, people want to escape reality when they read.
Exactly. Yeah.
Have you experienced one of your niches is have been a lot easier to sell than others, or do you just do what you love and don't worry about it?
I'm really impulsive, and I'll chase whatever I'm interested at the time, whether it's selling or not, which kind of goes against everything you're supposed to do. Reverse harem's so big right now. Those books sold fairly well. My bestsellers are my young adult fantasy. I have my Dragon trilogy has sold more than all of my other books combined. But I find that now much harder to market than the other books.
Yeah, that's the big paradox of marketing is the books that are very sought after are the ones that sell the best, but also the ones that are hardest to make stand out. So marketing becomes tricky.
Yeah, and expensive.
No, absolutely. We were discussing that before we got started.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so from what we've been talking about, you're obviously you talk about character design is very interesting to you, and you obviously had an eye for aesthetic. There are certain genres, like steampunk, for instance, where the aesthetic is as important as the fiction. So, do you feel like that sort of thing, given your background in crafting and creativity and all that, do you find that sort of setting is appealing to you?
Absolutely. I'm really drawn to anything that is vivid and intense in terms of characters, in terms of environment. I think that's what drew me so strongly to fantasy, is where the story is exceptionally important. Painting that picture and building that world, it's my favorite part out of all of it. And I think that's how I sort of went from architecture to cosplay to writing. It's all sort of related in the same world creation, creating space and characters, and just a different medium.
Absolutely. Do you find particularly actually, as you went into creating fiction and stuff, having, enjoyed that from sort of the other end, do you find there are certain aspects that maybe you wished other people had included, and that was one of the things you made sure that you expanded upon when you were writing?
Oh, it's so hard to say what I think other people should have included. You mean in all of their other works?
Certainly, really anything, but let's say, for example, you're creating a character, you're visually creating a character, and you're like, I really wish this level of detail was present in this other thing I read. I'm going to make sure when I write something, it's got that level of detail.
Yeah. There's a lot of books that I read that you sort of piece together a lot in your own mind, whether it's explained very well in the book or not. And I think that's the beauty of fiction, and a lot of books do that intentionally. A lot of authors do that intentionally. So you create your own world within theirs. But mine, I try to be quite specific in my world building and my character creation. And whether that's intentional or not, I'm not sure. I think it just comes from sort of what my background is. I read so many different genres and so many different authors and so many different types of books that it's hard to say because they all do it so differently.
Okay, so my question for you too is there a genre you haven't written in that you're eager to try?
Oh God. Psychological thriller. I've always wanted to do a really sort of dark, twisted thriller. And I was talking about it a few months back with Elsie Hibbett, my co-author. We were looking at maybe doing one together, but I don't know if I'm quite there yet. I feel like these last few years really have just been practice. And I have a long way to go in my craft before I can actually sit down and, do that just dream passion project. I want to make sure that it's, just perfect. And looking back at so many of my early works, the fact that I'm redoing them all now, I'm like, okay, don't want to rush it. I'm done putting out as many books as I can. I'm done testing the waters. I really want to, start focusing a little more intensely on on the craft. So maybe next year, or maybe in the next couple of years, you'll see a thriller come from me.
Of those that you have written so far, do you have a favorite genre, that is?
Genre, young adult fantasy, for sure. There's something about that sort of teenage angst and growing as a character and discovering new things that really appeals to me. But I think I read a lot of that growing up, so I think maybe that's what stuck with me a little more strongly. But I read so much and in so many different genres. It's really hard to say.
It sounds like you've got 3 names at this time until
Oh.
you do your thriller and maybe start a new pen name.
Yeah.
What kind of challenges have you faced? Because I know I've put my pen name on hiatus because it's just kind of hard to go back and forth and keep.
It's exhausting.
So what kind of challenges have you faced?
Having the various pen names,
Yes.
you mean, or just across genres? I found it really spreads me thin, so it's hard to do one thing right. The reason I spanned so many genres and I had so many pen names was because when I started, I really just wanted to find out what I loved to do the most and what I was good at. But in doing so, I now have a backlist that, you know, spans cozy mystery to young adult fantasy to paranormal romance. And trying to market all those things together under one brand is extremely tricky. So I thought I would split it up under a number of different pen names, but turns out being 2, 3, 4 different people is a lot of work too. So I think my biggest challenge, I guess, really has been just trying to manage that and find out what the best way to create a brand is when you have such a spastic task like I do. But really, that's sort of what I've learned this last year is that branding is so important, and that's the reason why I've been pulling a lot of my backlist and reorganizing it, rewriting, relaunching with proper covers, finding a way to really tie my work together in a stronger brand, so it's not just completely all over the place. Because one can only spread themselves so thin before before you completely burn out.
Yeah, I think there's an allure of pen names too, because
Yeah.
you can try stuff. And then, like, I've seen people that they sell really well under their regular name, and they're like, well, I'm going to try something a little new. So I'm going to start a pen name. And that does keep maybe the Amazon also bots kind of clean. Like, I just launched a new fantasy mystery series, and here's like my pen name, Naked Man chest covers. And they're like, oh,
Yeah.
no, that shouldn't be in the first slot for sure. But then like 3 or 4 years down the line, you realize it's really a challenge to keep putting books out. And if you're not, it falls off so quickly. So it's like you really have to weigh if that's something you want to get involved with or not.
Well, exactly. What I've done recently is I realized there's a lot more crossover between genres and the genres that I write than I initially thought there would be. So I've connected my pen names, the Nicole Marie and N.M. Howell, and the series that I'm re-releasing, Darkness Bites. It's a pretty steamy. The first book started out as an erotica that I wasn't even going to put out under my name, but I loved the story so much that I turned it into an ongoing series. But I'm relaunching that as Nicole Marie, but it's N.M. Howell writing as Nicole Marie, and I'm going to tag my main author name in it on Amazon, so it's all going to be connected, but it's still clear to the readers that it's separate from my YA stuff. I don't want anyone to go from my, teenage angst dragon books to accidentally picking up this book, thinking that it's going to be a young adult fantasy and be in for a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah, it's tough when you're doing the sex level is sort of like the defining, that's why I did a pen name too and kind of separated that stuff. So, because some people just really don't want it and other people just want it. And then if it's not there, they're like, where is it?
Yeah.
So it can be, that's often the dividing line for that stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned that your young adult dragon trilogy has kind of been your bestseller, and my dragons have been my bestseller too, even though maybe not the books that most resonate with people and like they want more of, which is interesting. You would not think it would be that way. But what do you think it is about dragons? Are they just people love them, or they're gorgeous on the covers, or is there just we all grew up reading them? I don't know.
Oh, I don't know. I think dragons are one of the most pure forms of escape, right? They are sort of the definition of fantasy, and I don't know. I mean, I'm completely drawn to them, and I can't really explain why. I think it's just that epic, mystical creature that doesn't exist in our world that, no, you know it's going to be a good story when there's a dragon. You know, there's going to be just some form of awesome adventure involved. Your dragon books, I started watching your guys' podcast before I started writing. When I first got into audiobooks a couple years ago, yours was the first series that I listened to, the Dragon Blood. And it took way longer than it should have after watching your podcast to realize that you were the one who wrote that Lindsay Broker was Lindsay Broker. And when I pieced 2 and 2 together, I was like, that's pretty damn cool.
Well, we try to actually do what we talk about on the show,
Yeah.
you know. I'm glad you found them and then were inspired to write some dragons of your own. I've definitely seen a lot of dragon books in the last year or two. Like, it's like people have realized, I think I talked about it too much on the podcast.
Yeah.
I won't say I was the first. I was actually Daniel Aronson always had
Yeah.
these books with these huge dragon covers, and they always got book pubs, you know, and
Yeah.
they sold like crazy. And I was like, I think a dragon on the cover is the secret, guys. I've cracked the code.
I just got a book bub on the first dragon book 2 days ago. I think I got the email. But
Excellent.
yeah, it's
Well,
for wide, and they were all in KU, and I just pulled them 2 or 3 days ago. Well, I guess the morning I got the book bub, and I'm a little nervous.
Well, at least you'll be off to a good start with the book bub.
Yeah.
Do you feel for people listening now in 2018, is it getting too crowded? Are there too many dragon books out, or can people still jump in and have some success?
Oh, there's no such thing as too crowded. That's so no, yeah. There's never going to be too many dragons. There's never going to be too many of any genre or any trope or anything really. I mean, this is the one thing that I really like to tell myself with my writing is, you know, cliches don't exist. There's no such thing as something that's overdone, especially when it comes to genre and tropes. The fact that someone might not do something because other people have done it, to me, just completely blows my mind. Because no matter how many dragon books there are out there, no matter how many, you know, cozy mysteries with, you know, editor witches are out there, yeah, the story's been told 1,000 times, but your story's never been told.
That's
So,
exactly right.
yeah, I mean, there's always room for more. People are always reading. You don't pick up a book about a dragon and put it down and say, oh, well, that was my dragon book. You know.
Yeah, they don't use up their dragon interest.
Exactly, and the more that's out there, the more people will be interested in the genre. So
Absolutely.
I don't know. Don't ever let the fact that there's a lot of something out there dissuade you from doing it yourself.
That's right. All right. So if I heard correctly during our intro, you have a background in architecture.
Yeah.
I went to New Jersey Institute of Technology, which has a big architecture program. And the thing I remember about Archies is that they were never in their dorms because they were always in the studio.
Oh yeah.
Seems to it like it attracts people who are very driven and very creative.
Yeah.
So do you feel like, you know, that background and that education carried over any skills into what you're doing now?
Absolutely. And yeah, that hits home a little bit, the always being in the studio. I was in school for 9 years. I went to a really intense tech school for my undergrad too, and I was living with my partner at the time, and I think I maybe saw him once every 2 weeks because we just don't leave the studio. We would sleep there. And I continued on to my master's, and I think it's hugely affected my books. I mean, in positive ways and in negative ways. I spent the last 9 years designing space and creating, you know, areas that people move through and interact with, and it's translated completely into the environments that I make in my books. I'm just fascinated with the idea of creating a space that people experience. One thing that I've noticed now that I'm going through my entire backlist is that because I've spent the last so many years creating space in a technical regard in terms of exiting, how do you get people from A to B? So many of my books are literally people going A to B. They walk down the hallways, they turn the corner, you know, they're that's literally just, you know, people moving from space to space to space with a story wrapped around it. So that's being edited out a lot, and I'm a lot more conscious of it.
Yeah, it's
But
amazing.
you can tell.
It's amazing how often, like, the first, you know, the first few years of your life gives you a toolbox, and the next
Yeah.
few years of your life, you're figuring out how to use those tools to do what you want to do, even if
Yeah.
it wasn't necessarily what the tools were for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you learn as much as you can. I mean, this sort of applies to everything that I've done in publishing. You want to learn as much as you can, and then forget everything and reteach yourself how to do it in your own terms. You know, it's important to have the base law knowledge, but you really need to figure out how that's going to work for the path that you're taking yourself.
Okay, so I want to let you know I particularly like your series with the witch on the covers and all the creative titles that go along with it. So, and I started wondering, have you ever based any of your characters on real life people? Because I can tell you, if you know, obviously from a fantasy point of view, I'm a fantasy author. If I'm standing in line and someone has taken forever, that person just became dragon fodder for the next story. So I was wondering if I'm the only one that does that.
I've included some people in them. I think I've included myself a lot more sort of subconsciously into my books than other people. Going back and looking at my work throughout the years and the main characters in my books, and a lot of the comments that I get in the reviews about what those characters are like in terms of their personality and their attitude, their negative attitude in a lot of the regards, I can really piece them together with the sort of area that I was in my life at the time. If I was going through a very dark time, my characters got really dark. If I was going through a really happy time, my characters were really happy. And I can really trace sort of the progression of the last few years of my own life through the main characters. And that was not intentional whatsoever, but
I've done that quite a few times where I'd write something, I'd give it to my wife to, what do you think about it? She's like, were you in a bad mood? I'm like,
yeah.
Why? Well, this is really angry here. I'm like, oh, I'm going to write it back there. But my other question for you is where do you draw your inspiration from?
Oh, God. It's probably the hardest question anyone could ever ask. Everywhere. Everywhere and everything. I'd like to say I draw inspiration from a lot of the books I read, but to be honest, when I'm writing, I really don't read as much as I would like to. I travel, or I used to travel a lot more than I have recently. I just haven't had the time, but a lot of the inspiration that I've drawn comes from places I visited. A lot of the cities in the world I create in my books sort of come from little specks of experiences that I've had in different cities throughout the world, but all in a sort of piecemeal fashion. You know, little memories of interacting with, you know, old castles in Europe, or, you know, really interesting beach towns in Asia. They all vividly sort of come together in my mind and sort of recreate those experiences in my books. I'm very affected by space. I think that probably comes a lot from my architectural background, but I'm so affected by the environments that I'm in. I think they definitely have a direct influence on the books that I write.
Yeah, I love travel for inspiration. Even if like you're not going to Europe, you know, even just going like to whatever local ruins or something you have and taking the tour can give you some ideas.
Yeah,
I did a whole prequel, what became prequel novellas based off in salt mines after going to Poland, and they had these amazing.
The Wieliczka salt mines.
Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
The salt mines there with the
totally
chapel.
butchered that.
Yeah, it had all
I've been there.
Yeah, they're just crazy. It was very inspiring. All the stuff they'd carved into these levels and levels of mines.
The chapel.
Yes.
Now that is something straight out of a fantasy novel. I mean, you don't need to embellish on that at all. That was just.
Yeah, you could practically imagine the dwarves down there with their pickaxes carving the salt statues out of the walls.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's kind of swing into some marketing questions. Even though you're kind of all over the place, it sounds like, which we don't necessarily recommend on the show,
Nope.
even if I think all three of us kind of are that way too.
Yeah.
We've seen people be really successful when they're really focused, but it's always, I think it's inspiring that people can sell well when they are jumping around. So, well, let's just start out asking, it sounds like you went into maybe Kindle Unlimited first, and now you're experimenting with Wide. What are your thoughts on everything so far?
I love KU. All my books were in KU. I really didn't mind having all my eggs in one basket. I found it really helped launching the books and getting new readers, especially as a new writer. I think it made it so much easier to reach new people. I mean, they're more likely to take a chance on a book if you don't have to pay for it for a new author. I am moving Wide now, which is terrifying because that was my best-selling series. So we'll see what happens in this next week. But in terms of marketing, I have dabbled a little bit everywhere. And what I've learned, which is quite important, I think, going forward for me, is that every single genre is marketed differently. And I see a lot of success in very different places for all the different series that I have. So what works really well for my cozy mysteries doesn't work at all for my fantasy. And what works for my fantasy doesn't work for my paranormal romance. And it really takes a lot of experimentation to find what kind of marketing works specifically for your work. And I wasted a lot of money testing this out and dabbling in everything from BookBub ads to Facebook to AMS and all that stuff. But I'm sort of getting to the place now that I know what works. And so now I can really hone in and focus on maximizing those.
It's a good point because what works in one genre, I found that too. I mentioned on the show before, like my sci-fi romance with the pen name did pretty well with the BookBub, like pay-per-click, I think was the only option then. And I think it's because they don't really accept that genre. I mean, it's sort of accidental if they take one because they don't have a category for it. So probably people weren't seeing it very often on there and they were like, oh, cool, it's an alien with a naked chest. Of course I want it. But I had less luck with like the dragons and the more of the traditional fantasy, but I think they do show that pretty often. They take those, so maybe people aren't like, oh, they're like, oh, more dragons and castles, whatever. What are you liking most now? Like, are you doing the Amazon ads or?
Mostly Amazon. I do a little bit of everything. I'm going to be upping my Facebook and my BookBub quite a bit more now that I'm Wide. I find for my fantasy, AMS is the only thing that really has proven extremely successful for me. Facebook is the place to be for anything romance. My reverse harem books, I solely promote on Facebook, and the readers are extremely engaged and interact with the authors. And then BookBub seems to work the best for my cozy mystery. I think just because their cozy readership is just absolutely massive. It's the biggest list they have, and it seems to do really well in terms of drawing. Those cozy readers are just absolutely voracious. So if you get your cover in front of the right people, it'll do well.
Yeah, that's
I think that's the key to any of it, isn't it? Finding those right people.
But there are certain genres where it's not just a matter of them being enthusiastic about reading, but about just, again, ravenous. They'll consume so many books, and so it's almost a genre that can't be saturated because they can't be satisfied. The common wisdom is that rapid release is the way to go if you're trying to make a living. How quickly do you release, and like, was that your plan?
Yeah, so I release as quickly as possible. I like to have at least 2 books on the go or ready to go when I launch. My Darkness Bites series that I'm relaunching this month under my Nicole Marie name, when I released them last year, I released the first 2 on the same day. And then I had the 3rd on pre-order and released it about 3 weeks later, I think. And then same with the 4th and the 5th. Well, not the 5th. The 5th hasn't out yet, so that's a complete lie. But that did extremely well. And having the 2 books out at the very beginning allowed me to put the first one really, really cheap. I launched it at 99 cents, and then I went free not long after for about in KU, and it took off, because that first book can be a bit of a loss leader when you have the second one ready to go.
Yep.
And I found that extremely effective, and so much easy to market a new book when there's more for the readers to find right away. With my Dragon trilogy, they came out about a month apart, and that was still good, but definitely at least having the first 2 come out really, really quick, I think has been absolute key. And then, I mean, once if people have gone from book 1 to book 2, normally they're engaged in the series and they're waiting for more. So then you can space it out a little more. And I found with the later books, you don't have to release as quickly because the readers will be looking for it. But with my future work, absolutely, I'm going to try and do either 2 at once or within a week. Because out of all my launches, that was definitely the way in advance of all the others. It did the best.
How far ahead do you plan what books you're going to be writing? Like, obviously you write a couple books if you're going to do a rapid release, but like how far, like what does your launch calendar look like? How far into the future does it go?
I've got the next decade planned out. I'm working on about 6 different series right now. So whether I stick to it, we'll see. I'm all over the place, but I have the next year for sure in terms of what I know absolutely that I'm going to be releasing. For the next couple of months until the end of this year, really, I'm going to be focused on my relaunches of my backlist while I work on writing my new series that will be released early next year. And then hopefully by then I'll have at least 2 ready to go. I have an epic fantasy romance that I'm going to be launching in January that I'm working on now, and through the re-releases and the editing and the launching and the marketing and all that I'm working on my backlist, I'm sort of writing those new series to have something new to kick off in January.
So my question for you is, are you an outliner? Are you someone who has to plot out every little detail of your books, or do you write as you go?
I'm a huge outliner now. All my early books, I just completely pantsed. And it's very obvious that I did. Looking back, there's so many plot holes and things that I missed. And that comes out in the reviews, absolutely. So it's great in that regard. I can, go through all my past reviews of my backlist, and the answers to what I was missing are all there in the 1 stars, so I know exactly what to fix. But I find now, absolutely, I outline, and I try to outline in as much detail as I can. And I find when I outline, I can write so quickly. I dictate, and having that strict outline, it really makes a difference.
All right. So you mentioned that you have your next year all planned out for your books. Have you outlined all those titles, or you just kind of know what you want to write?
Yeah. A lot of them I have, or at least partially. My fantasy romance I'm working on, Of Blood and Betrayal, is the name of the first book. It's the whole thing's outlined, and it's going to be a series of trilogies, about 6 or 7 trilogies, all in the same world. And the whole concept is loosely outlined. The first trilogy is very outlined in a lot of detail. And as I write, I sort of outline the next books and the next trilogies just to make sure that all the threads tie together. And because that was one of the biggest shortfalls, I think, in my past books, is my series, the story was very linear, because when I just pantsed it, I thought, the single story. But now that I'm outlining, there's so much more going on. There's, second and third and fourth and fifth storylines that all weave in together. And the books have a lot more depth when I outline, for sure.
Okay, I have to ask you, you're doing an epic fantasy romance with like 8 trilogies. Did you say 6 trilogies? Is this all going to be the same couple, or are you going to do different romances within the series?
So I'll share it with you guys after the podcast. I have a map drawn up for the world, and each trilogy is going to be a different race within the world. The concept is the whole world is at war, the realm is at war, and all the races are separate and warring, and then each romance happens within each region. And then as the trilogy is all linked together towards the end, the world kind of starts coming together. So it's all tied together, but each trilogy will be its own thing.
Okay, gotcha. And that sounds promising. I was going to say, do romance people, I mean, I think that I've done that where there's like 8 books that end up having the same couple, but then you have to kind of go, okay, so now they're going to get married and then they're going to have kids, and you need something like conflict, you know, with each book, and that can be a bit of a challenge.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think I have the skill to extend the same couple. And I mean, really, romance is a big stretch for me. There's not a whole lot of romance in most of my past books, so this is really new territory for me, and I'm really enjoying it.
Okay, so right now you've got a perma-free book 1, it looks like, with the Witch series. Yeah. Are you finding, I guess you weren't publishing kind of in the heyday when when perma-free worked really well and all the top 100s were displayed on Amazon of the free, side by side?
I know, and you guys always talk about it too. Oh, the good old days.
Well, what are you finding doing it these last couple years? We've kind of heard, and I've experienced myself, like it can work fine, but you do have to do promos usually. What's your experience been so far with that?
Well, so I went perma-free on that one because I got a book bub last month. But up until then, I do everything full price. All the first in series are full price. I launch at full price. So this was absolutely new territory for me. It's doing really well. It carries itself a lot easier having the first book free, I found, for that series. I don't have to do a lot of promotion to keep it up. That being said, I haven't checked how well it's doing in the last couple of weeks, so I think it's probably sunk quite a bit, but I'll blame Amazon for that one, though. They botched my book bub. They sent out the wrong book. It was a bit of a disaster. But free's good. I don't think I'm going to keep it at free. I find it gets a lot of readers that aren't actually all that interested in reading it, and it gets a lot of readers that might not be that interested in that genre, which then ends in not so good reviews, and the read-through is a lot worse. So I think I'll probably bump that one up to at least 99 cents, maybe full price.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked a little bit earlier about how you do rapid release, and but also that you experiment with advertising. So do you feel like the most valuable time of a book is its launch? Do you focus on major launches, or is there sort of a maintenance thing going on too?
Launches are really important. For me, it's been maintenance. I had a bit of a year this last year, and apart from my co-authored series, I haven't really put anything new out under my own name since, oh God, last fall, maybe, whereas I normally put out at least a book or 2 a month. So it has been maintenance. This whole last year for me has been maintenance. And I don't put a whole lot into the launches. I don't put a whole lot more money into a launch than I would on any other day to keep the books afloat. I rely more on newsletter exchanges and, word of mouth for my launches. That being said, I'm now in quite a few groups and talking to a lot of people who are really, really into Facebook advertising and doing those big, aiming for the sub 100 on Amazon on their launches. And I'm getting all, ooh, I kind of want to do that. So maybe on my next series launch, I might try and push it a little further and put a little more money into it and just see how it goes. But definitely maintenance. If I wasn't maintaining it, I wouldn't be able to be doing this right now, because this last year has been so slow for me. Trying to make up for it now.
So my question for you is, when you release a new title in an existing series now, do you focus all your attention on the new one, or do you actually throw some advertising bucks or try and get some attention on, like, say, the first in the series, just to attract some more people into that particular series?
I focus on the first in series. I'll advertise to those who have already bought the series, to my mailing list, to people in my group who I know would already be interested. I rarely have like AMS ads going for the later books in the series. I'll maybe set up 1 or 2, just, you know, low key, low spend ads, but I definitely put all my effort into book 1. And in that marketing, when I promote book 1, whether it's on Facebook or through the blurb and AMS, I'll usually mention that, you know, book 4 now available, but it will all be targeted through book 1 in a series. And I found that to be far more effective than putting the effort into marketing the later books. And I learned that kind of the hard way. For my Dragon trilogy, I really marketed the 3rd one quite hard. And I noticed I got quite a few reviews, because it really is meant to be read in a sequence. They're not quite standalones. And I started getting reviews on the 3rd one saying, well, this didn't really make sense. You have to read book 1 first. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's a series. So I had to rethink my marketing a little bit. But these are the things you learn. You learn as you go.
Even if you put on there like so-and-so volume 3, you know, it would be insinuated that you should check out number 1 first. But yeah, it's amazing how people just don't pick up on that.
Yeah. Well, and I've learned people don't really read the blurbs or descriptions anyway, so they're going to do what they do. But it's our job to make it as easy as possible for them to find what we need them to find.
We had one guest on who had some luck running the Kindle countdowns and doing a free days on her book 2 in her series. And then I think she had book 1 at 99 cents at the same time. And I've thought about doing that, but I'm like, no, my book 2 is almost in almost all the series. You really need to have read 1. Like, I don't always do cliffhangers, but you'd be lost. And so I'd be afraid that I'd get all these people picking it up without throwing the 99 cents down for the first book, and I'm so lost. These dragons suck. Yeah, well, I know that's my biggest fear, but I followed quite a few people who've had book bubs on book 2 and 3 and had huge success. So I don't know if those are more standalones in a series or what, but yeah, I think if they could stand alone, like if each book was an individual mystery or something, that would make a lot of sense. And those people are probably fortunate. They don't have to always just advertise the first book in a series. Or just make it very, very clear at the beginning of the book, you know, chapter 1, this is book 2, read book 1 first, you know, so it's very, very clear. Yeah. So you know, as we mentioned in the intro, you've got this hilariously witchy reverse harem mystery series you're working on now with a co-author. Yeah. And it's, I mean, reverse harem is trendy, but yours, I would say, is not to market. It's totally turning it on its head. Yeah. So with marketing stuff that really doesn't fit neatly into a category, what have you found? Like, what's working for you with that? Well, as I kind of mentioned before, I found that there's a lot more crossover between most of these genres than I thought there ever would be. I'm getting a lot of emails from my cozy readers, that my readers in that genre really seem to be the only ones who enjoy communicating back and forth via email, but so many of them sent me messages about it saying that, wow, you know, like, we've never read a book quite like this before. Like, it was so different, but it was really interesting, and that they had no idea that this other genre existed and that they're now going to go check it out. I think because that series touched so lightly on all the different genres that it sort of worked as a bit of a blend, but the marketing was tricky. We had to be extremely clear when we marketed it to the reverse harem readers that it was a cozy mystery, and then when we marketed it to the cozy readers, we had to be very clear that it was a sort of reverse harem twist, so that there was no surprises, and it kept the readers away that knew for sure they wouldn't be interested in it, while those who were, you know, kind of curious, at least they knew what they were getting into. And it's been received extremely well. What started just as a really fun project ended up being something that kind of took off, so we weren't really expecting that, but
that's excellent.
God, that series was fun to write.
Well, that's often the most important thing.
Yeah.
And partially what my next question is about, like, we talked a bit about how, like, you've planned out a lot of your next writing. It's planned well in advance. And it seems like you are driven primarily by the kind of books you want to write, as opposed to necessarily the kind of books that'll sell.
Yeah.
That having been said, have you ever, like, watched the performance of a given book or a given series, and has that altered your future plans? Like, well, this is going really well. I should probably add some more books to this series.
Yes. I'd say yes in the fact that my cozy series was meant just to be a practice book. Book one that I put out was meant to just kind of be testing the waters of this whole writing thing. And then I've always wanted to write fantasy, and the reason I started with cozy mystery was because I wanted to actually learn more before diving in. Um, but it did well, and the genre was really, really hot. You know, Amanda Lee was doing really well, Amy Boyles was doing really well. Like, so many of those authors were just killing it, and my first book sort of got wrapped up in that big hype when it first came out, and so I stuck with it. I ended up writing 2 more in the series, and then I wrote a 4th one that I co-authored with a friend of mine. So I guess, yeah, in that regard, it's exciting seeing your books do well. So it's sort of motivation to stick to something, but my attention can only be caught for so long. I'm very much ooh, look a shiny, and bounce from from genre to genre, to book to pen name to pen name. I'm working on it.
So now that you're a full-time author, do you maintain a set schedule or keep daily goals for yourself?
Well, actually right now, so I'm back at an old job temporarily during the day. I was full-time all last year. So I did. So my schedule when I am full-time and when I do go back to full-time, which will be soon, I wrote in the mornings. I woke up, I worked from 8 to noon, and I would do at least 5,000 words in the morning and hit my quota. And then the afternoons were spent on marketing and covers and kind of the, you know, all the stuff that wraps around it. But I find I'm so much more productive first thing in the morning when my brain's clear. I can't write at night. I can't write well at night. My brain is just so cluttered and chaotic. But I found having that set schedule, every morning I would wake up, I would write, and I wouldn't do anything else until the words were done. And I got a lot out, and I found I would get really excited about it. Like when I had extremely productive mornings, I would just sit and I would write all day. And I think I got up to like 18,000 words one day, and I was really in the zone. And right now, I came back to my old job that I was working a number of years ago. So my routine has been completely turned on its head for the time being. I write first thing in the morning for an hour before work, and then I write in the evenings because I have to.
All right. And so, of course, that leads me to ask the question, your work environment, do you have to be distraction free? No cell phone, no internet, no nothing, or nothing gets done? Because that's what most of us seem to do.
Oh yeah, I'm like one of those really easily distracted, chaotic kind of people. So I need to be sitting there, and I need to be in an environment that allows me to concentrate. If I'm in a cluttered room, if there's people in the next room that I can hear, if there's anything going on, I really struggle to focus. So.
I liked your shiny object analogy.
Yeah.
Ooh, what's that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I'm really bad for that. So when I'm focused, I'm really focused. But if there's stuff going on, if my phone's on, or if I have Facebook in the background, yeah, no, there's no words. The words will come on Facebook, but not on the novel.
So you're actually a part of this big Realms and Rebels reverse harem multi-author bundle that looks like it just came out a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Was that sort of a marketing thing, or did you write something that ties into your other series?
So that was fun. We tied in a short story to our Cats, Ghosts, and Avocado Toast series. What we found is we started getting a lot of comments because it was a cozy mystery. I mean, it's a very sweet, fluffy series, and it's meant to be. We got a lot of comments from the reverse harem readers wanting us to spice it up a lot. And we didn't want to do that to this series itself, but we joined this anthology and we wrote a sort of dirty dream sequence for the main character for that set. So for the readers that wanted something a little more, we would send them to the anthology so they got their, you know, little spicy treat within the series without actually straying that much from the genre. you don't really want to put that kind of stuff in a book you're branding as cozy. You'd scare away a few too many readers, I think.
I am curious. I've actually never read a witch cozy. I'd never really heard of that as a thing until a couple years ago. Are there, like, why is this a big thing? Like, is it because there were all those, remember Bewitched and like all those old
Yeah.
school witch TV sitcom kind of things? And I'm just curious why. I mean, that's awesome. I never would have thought of that as like a niche that would have a big following, but it seems like people really enjoy them.
I don't know. You know what? I think what draws me to that genre is, at least with a lot of the books I read, they're so light on the fantasy. They're very much real world based mysteries, characters that you can really relate to, but there's that paranormal sort of blanket over it. So you get that escape, but you can really get immersed as if you're part of the world. So different than so many of the other paranormal sort of romance and stronger fantasy books that are out there where, it's a stretch, it's an alternate world. These books really are a lot of them anyways, the ones that I've enjoyed reading, they're all, set in the real world or sort of parallel to the real world, a fictional town, but that's very, small town USA or, the environments and the places, and it's just very human. They're very, a lot of them are set, in a bakery or, a little small town journal newspaper, and it's just got the really perfect blend of ties to reality and then ties to that sort of fantasy element. And I don't know, I think that's extremely appealing, apparently, to a lot of people, because it's such a huge
Right.
genre.
Yeah, maybe it's sort of for the people that urban fantasy is too intense. There's too many epic battles and things going on.
Yeah. No, these are light and quick and relatable, and it's sort of a lot of these you can just pick up and just enjoy it in a day.
Are there any like dragon cozies or vampire cozy, or is it witches or nothing?
I don't know. I'd love to read a dragon cozy. You should write one.
All right, I probably have to read some witch cozies first. So,
Yeah.
but
A lot of the ones I've read are all very similar, the same, small town, young witch.
I have read cat cozies. My
Oh,
mom
yeah?
was big into those Lillian Jackson Braun, I think it was. It did like a zillion The Cat Who books. So that's probably a starting point. But with the multi-author bundle, are you finding that that's still like, they were really big there for a while. There were tons of them, 99 cents, get all these books. How did you find the launch? Because it looks like you guys just went through with that.
Yeah, we did really well. I think we sold, a huge number of copies in the first week. We were hoping to make the USA Today list. I think we probably just missed it. There were too many back to school books on the list. But yeah, I don't know. It did really well. I always enjoy being part of the anthologies. They're not as successful as I would have hoped them to be in terms of read through and gaining new readership. They sell a lot of copies, but not everyone reads every story. It is a great way to get some new readers, but the biggest reason that I do them is just to get to know other authors and sort of become closer within the indie author community, and you make more connections. And I think the biggest benefit of these sets really is just the relationships that you build through it and the cross-promotional opportunities. But they're fun. It's a really good excuse to write stories that you probably wouldn't have otherwise written to fit into the themes.
And it looked like that one in particular has a lot of authors.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know if you tried any with maybe 8 authors, and maybe the read through, sell through might be a little higher just because there are fewer things to distract people.
Yeah. No, I haven't been in any that are smaller. I'd love to, but they take up a lot of time and they're a big commitment. I've been in half a dozen so far, and I probably won't do any more for a while. Focus on my own things, because you're part of a team, and during the launch, everyone contributes, and you focus a lot of your energy, your time into it. And it's great. It's a really good experience, good learning experience in terms of marketing and what works and what doesn't. But I'll probably be taking a bit of a break from them for a while. get my own stuff out. I need to get my own books out. I've got a whole year to make up for.
Yeah. One of the things, like you mentioned, that especially because with a lot of authors, the money gets sliced up pretty thin, so profits probably going to be pretty low on a bundle like that. And cross promotion is good, but if networking is a big thing, do you feel then like one of the major decisions you should be making when you are invited to, or when you're going to pitch to be in a bundle, is what kind of people you're working with? Like, should you be choosy about the other authors in a bundle?
Well, I think absolutely, in terms of the genre that they write in, you definitely want to choose sets and anthologies that are beneficial to what you're currently writing and what you plan to release. I found the sets that I've been in the past, they've been most beneficial to the books that I've released after. Because you gain a lot of new, a moderate amount of new readers that at least your name is in front of them. And so when you have new releases after, your visibility is, I find, a lot higher. And I've had a lot more success on my launches that come after, rather than having those readers pass through to my backlist. But yeah, I mean, just as in anything in this industry, you want to make sure you're joining something with people that you're wanting to work with. So you gotta be careful, I guess, but try to avoid any drama. Every set that I've been in has been fantastic. It's been good people.
Do you feel that all authors should try to become involved with one of these multi-author bundles?
You know what, I would, if simply for the networking experience and the marketing experience, and just to see how these things are run. Everyone brings their own expertise to the table, and you learn so much. Someone might be great at Facebook ads, someone's great at Facebook, someone has connections for newsletter swaps. In the first few that I was in, it was completely eye-opening just seeing what other people did and being in that more intimate forum. You learn so much from all those big Facebook groups and all that. And I spent a lot of time online interacting with other authors and following people's posts and launches, but being in those specific groups for each box set, you come away with so much knowledge. Just even for that and the relationships you build, I would say absolutely do it. I haven't made any money from any of the sets that I've been in the past. So if you go in sort of, educated enough to know what you're going to get out of it, I'd say absolutely.
Should you say yes to another one, is there anything you'd like to do differently?
Oh, yeah, no, don't aim for a list. Just aim for gaining readers organically and promoting it. I don't know. If I do a list again, it would definitely be a money-making set. It would be probably exclusive to Amazon. Get the readers where your books are available. There's so much stress on the sets that are trying to make the bestsellers list that it just becomes so chaotic during the launch week that, you kind of forget what's important and get really wrapped up in the hype and the stress. It'll be a while before I join a set again, though.
That was actually going to be my warning to people, is just make sure you find out what the promotional obligations are going to be, because if you're not somebody that does newsletter swaps and you're expected to go arrange 10 newsletter swaps to promote the thing, that may not jive with how you usually do business.
No,
and
exactly.
Those ones can be, like, we're going to hit the New York Times bestseller list, so then you got to plan to sell like 30,000 copies, right?
Yeah. You have to dedicate at least a week or two of your time solely.
Yeah, but
marketing, yeah.
I've done quite a few of them, and I've found that the ones that are really focused and are like if you do a steampunk one and you write steampunk, you will get the read through, and people, especially if you do your story in such a way that like intrigued, I want to find out how these characters got together, and look, here it is. Here's the whole series over here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've been talking your ear off for like an hour. So is there anything else, any final tips for maybe newer authors who are hoping to jump in right today in 2018?
Tips? Oh gosh. Man, I guess I'll reiterate what I've already said. So there are a few rules that I try to stick to, or at least to remind myself of, in terms of writing and publishing. The first is learn absolutely everything you can, absorb as much as you can from people who are successful, and then once you think you know everything, forget it all and relearn it in your own way. Because if you spend your early years trying to mimic someone else's success, follow the steps that they did, you're going to find yourself completely disappointed because you're trying to be somebody else. So take everything you learn, forget it, and relearn it, reinterpret it. Rule number 2 said no such thing as a cliche. You should never let the fact that other people are doing something dissuade you from doing it yourself, because that's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. People say that all the time. Oh, that's so cliche. It's like, well, there's a reason that these things come up all the time. It's because it's successful. It's what people want to see. Yeah, I don't know. Just do it. My advice is just do it. That's what I did. I didn't know a whole lot. I had never written a book before. I didn't have an editor. I didn't have a cover designer. I just bit the bullet, took the risk, wrote the book, and put it out there. And you never know until you try. So don't let the fear of not succeeding hold you back.
All right, sounds like good advice. And guys, I want to see those dragon cozies, so let me know when you can publish them.
Give it a month. I bet we're going to see a half dozen of them pop up now.
A dragon would look great on those silhouette covers that have the witch on the broomstick in front of the moon. You just throw a dragon in there, it'll be good. Yeah.
Well, I have been playing with the idea of an epic fantasy mystery series, so we'll see. Maybe dragons will rear their head. Dragon detective.
There you go. I'm waiting to see that. All right. Well, let us know where people can find you online, and remind us of your first books that they can check out, or book ones, I should say.
Yeah. I have a website, nmhowell.com. I'm on Facebook and Twitter. I love hanging out on Twitter. Nico, Nikk0 Marie on Twitter. And then if you just search NM Howell on Facebook, I should be hopefully the first one to pop up there. All my books are available on Amazon, and going forward, some of them will be available wide. I do tend to give out free books when people ask for them, so if anyone's interested in starting any of my series, you can always reach out on Facebook. Yeah, that's it. I love interacting with people, so if anyone's listening, send me a message on Facebook.
All right, sounds cool. And I will put your Twitter and Facebook handles there in the show notes. This is episode 197, guys.
Oh gosh.
Thank you for joining us, Nico. And I'm going to go check out your pen names after the show, or at least the one you told us. We still don't know the last one. Don't know how much.
I have a secret sci-fi one out there. Maybe you can track it down.
It's nice to meet you, Nico. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks, guys.
So long, everybody.